Okay, so I thought I would make another video, this time on the perfect tense, and since this is a really complex tense, I thought I was going to make some separate videos just to make it a bit easier to follow along, and because I don't want to overwhelm you with lots of details. So today I just want to focus on the perfect tense with haben. As always, I will put the link to the presentation below so you can follow along, and that should allow you to not only take some notes if you want, but also to do the exercises that I will include in this video. So let's get started. I think that the perfect tense is one of the things that students tend to struggle with the most when learning German, because it is quite complex and there's a lot of different things to be aware of. So it takes quite a bit of practice, but it is certainly possible to become quite confident using this tense. And with enough practice, you can really minimize any mistakes. So what I want to have a look at today is, obviously I'm going to give you a general overview. I'm going to explain which different elements we need in order to form the perfect tense, and obviously I will also show you how we can put all those elements together to form sentences, and I give you some practice materials as well, and some further help and advice that you might find helpful. Right, so the perfect tense is a little bit tricky, because it has basically two main forms. So we're just focusing on the one with haben today, because I think that's a little bit easier, because it works pretty much the same way as the English perfect tense. You will need a form of haben, so to have, and then you will also have to add a past participle, and I explain a bit later how we can form this. And it is important to be aware that there is a separate form using sign as a helping word. So we're not going to cover the details on distinguishing the both different forms right now. I just want to give you a very quick overview so that you at least know that there are two different forms, and then I will probably cover this in another video to make it really clear when you use which form and how to distinguish between the two. If you already want to take some notes about that, obviously you can. I've put on a little notepad here that you can use to take notes if you want. So you could just write down different ideas. So for example, the important thing to know really is that the perfect tense with haben is used in a majority of cases, really, with any kind of actions that describe normal activities, like playing, buying, eating, all of those kind of things. And then the difference when we would use sign, really, the main difference is that we use them with any kind of activities that indicate a change of location. So, for example, walking, going, traveling, all of those words really show us that we are changing location, we're going somewhere else, and we're moving around, and that's when we use sign as a helping word. The other exception when we would use sign is to describe changes of a state. So, for example, falling asleep, waking up, those kind of things, because they show a change in your state of consciousness, really. But as I said, that's not really as important right now. I just wanted to make sure that you are aware of this, and then we will just continue to focus on mainly on the perfect tense with haben. So what you will need, as always, is a personal pronoun. So you should by now already know those. I've put them on here again in case you've forgotten any of those, but it's likely that you will have to use all of those if you're studying for the GCSEs, for example, although obviously there are some pronouns that are used more often than others. So, for example, the ones you will probably use the most are I, we, and then maybe he, she, it as well. Then you should already know the forms of haben in the present tense, because it tends to be one of the verbs that we learn first when we start learning German. It's such a common, important word. So I hope that you will know those forms already and that you're fairly confident. Otherwise, you might want to practice those a little first before continuing with the perfect tense, because it gets quite tricky to learn something as complex as this if the basics aren't really secure. And then we will need one further element which you probably haven't really seen yet. So that's the past participle, and I show you in a second what that will actually look like. So most of the time you will be able to form them quite easily by taking the stem of a verb and then adding some extra elements. So that would be a GE in front and a T in the end. So it could look like this: gekauft, gemacht, getanzt, gespielt. With all of this, you can see that there's just a GE in front and a T in the end. The problem is, as with any language really, there are quite a few irregular forms as well, so I will probably cover those in a separate video, just because I don't really want to overwhelm you at the moment with loads of different forms. So for the grammar, again, it's really important that you know the forms of haben in the present tense, and that you feel fairly confident using those, because you will need them again to form the perfect tense. So you could just have a go at this. Those are not perfect tense sentences, obviously, but I just want to make sure that you know the forms of haben fairly well. So you could just pause the video for a second and have a go at that task. And obviously, if you have accessed that presentation using the link below this video, then you can also use the check button on here and see how you did. So I do that very quickly. It should be ich habe with an E. Then if we've got a plural form, so they have a cat, it would be haben with an en in the end. You have got a sister should be du hast. We have 2 cars should be haben again. So remember in the plural it's we've got 2 forms with en in the end. We've got ihr habt, so you all have a house, and the last one should be hat. So he has a new flat. Okay, so let's move on to the new bit, the new important grammar. So I'm just going to show you how to form the past participles. So that's the thing that you probably will find the trickiest at first when forming the perfect tense, just because it's a completely new concept really. So but it's not too tricky at this stage if we're just focusing on regular forms. So what you will have to do is to take the stem of the verb. So most of the time you will get to the stem by cutting off the en in the end. That's not always exactly going to happen like that, but in 99% of all cases you will just be able to cut off the en and you will get to the stem of the verb. So for example, I could take hören and cut off the last 2 letters, the en, to get to the stem, which should be hör. And then what we always have to do with the regular past participles is to add 2 basic building blocks. So that would be a GE in front, so we've got gehör here, and then we also need to add a T in the end. Okay, the same would be for tanzen. We basically need to get to the stem again by cutting off that en, and then we add the 2 new elements. So we add a GE in front here, and we add a T in the end. So it can be a bit confusing in the beginning when you're first starting to use this tense, but with more practice it will get pretty much like second nature. So I show you again how that works. So we just need to get rid of the en to get the stem, which should be Arbeit, and then we add a G and E in front, and we have a T in the end. Same for tanzen, we have a GE in front and a T in the end. Malen, that's just to paint, pretty much of a rare word I guess, but it works exactly the same. GE in front, then you add the stem, and instead of the en we just have a T. Let's just do 2 more. If I've got spielen, to play, I start as always with GE, and then I add the stem, and in the end it will just be a T again instead of the EM. And last one, again we start off with a GE, we add the stem and just put on a T in the end to finish off. Shouldn't be too tricky, it just takes a bit of time to get used to those really. But I think with a bit of practice you can definitely master that part of the perfect tense quite quickly. Now when we want to put all of those things together into a sentence, students tend to struggle a little with the word order. You should, for basic sentences, always start with the person and the form of haben. So start off with ich habe, du hast, er, sie, es hat, wir haben, and so on. And have that as the first idea, the first element of the sentence. Then you can add any other information that you like. So it could be something about when you did this, how you did this, where you went, those kind of things. And the last part of the sentence should always be the past participle. Okay, so that needs to go at the very, very end of the sentence. So that's something that students tend to forget in the beginning, that they need to move the verbs around basically. So as I said, we only focus on the regular past participles, and then I will make another video covering the more uncommon forms and irregular forms. But really, just as a reminder, we need to stick to the same structure. First, the person and the form of haben. Then we have to cover any other details that we want to include. And the last bit in the sentence should always be the past participle. So if we're just focusing on sentences with I, you will see that it should look fairly easy. It's just the same structure all over again. Ich habe in the beginning, then we've got guitar as like further details, and the very last thing in the sentence should always be the past participle. So remember that's the bit with GE in front here, and then we've just stuck on an extra T in the end. Same for listening to music. Will look pretty much the same, starting off the same, then we just change the details and we put the past participle in the end again. I have bought clothes, again same structure. I have in the beginning, ich habe, then we've got further details and the past participle in the end. And last one with that structure, ich habe Hausaufgaben gemacht. So it looks exactly the same as the previous sentences. We've got the person and the form of haben first, then we've got the details, and lastly we've got the past participle with the GE and the T in the end. Now if we want to use different persons, it doesn't change anything about the main structure. The only thing that changes will be the first part on here, so you will only have to find different variations for the person and the form of haben, but then the rest of the structure stays exactly the same. We have the further details, and then the last, as always, will be the past participle. So for example, I could say we have learned for school. Du hast in the beginning, so that's again just a person and the form of haben. Then we've got any further details and the past participle in the end. Same here. The only thing that changes is the person and the form of haben. But the rest of the structure is the same. We just need to be aware that the past participle needs to be in the end. He has cooked rice. Again, the only thing really that changes is we need to have a different form of haben, and obviously the corresponding person. Then we've got our details and the past participle in the end. And then obviously we can compare that with the previous structures that we've seen. Ich habe Hausaufgaben gemacht. It's the same structure, we're just basically changing the details of the sentence. So if you want, you can practice a little using some practice sentences that I've put here. We always need to remember that the person should be first, and this always goes hand in hand with the form of haben. So those two should always be together really. Then we can add any other details that we want to include. So in this case I want to include tennis, and the last thing should always be the past participle. Okay, I've got a couple of more examples that you could try, but I will quickly go through them just to save a little bit of time here. As always, we start off with the person and the form of haben, then we add any other details, and the last thing we need is the past participle. If I want to say we have bought food, so we're using a different person, but the structure will stay exactly the same. We have, that's those two words should always go together. Then we have any other details, and last thing is always the past participle. Okay, so let's do one last thing. Sie hat. Those two things will always go together in front, and we've got any other details, and lastly the past participle. Shouldn't be too tricky once you've got used to that structure. You just really need to make sure that you remember to have the past participle in the end here, because I found that that's the thing that people tend to forget most often. They just put that wherever they want. So remember that's the last thing in the sentence. Okay, so I just want to give you a bit of practice material in case you want to use this. I'm not going to go through all of those because it would take a long time really, but if you have access to presentation you can use those practice tasks to get a bit of a handle on this and see how it works. So I've put on here a little quiz and some further tasks that you can use just to practice those forms. As I said, I won't go through all of those, won't check all of those tasks with you because it would take quite a bit of time, but they are self-marking, so you will instantly get the answers to your inputs. And if you've got any questions about any of those tasks, you can obviously put those in the comments below, and I will come back to you and see whether I can help you with that. In case you want to have some further resources, I've put on a couple of things that you might find helpful. So I've put on a list here with irregular past participles if you want to have a look at those already. So you can just click on that link here. I've put on some additional exercises. I've put on a Quizlet with the main forms that you will probably use most often, and I've put some more fun tasks on here as well. So if you want, you could have a go at the word wall challenge and see how quickly you can complete those tasks. If there's anything else that you think would be helpful, then again just put those in the comments, and then I will see if I can find some other ways to help you with this tense. But so far that was really good work, and I hope that this video helped you to understand a little bit more about the perfect tense, how you form it, when you use it, and stay tuned for any other videos on different aspects of this tense.